Dear Tova, dear colleagues, esteemed scholars and experts, Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman. My name is Moshe Baumel. I'm from Basel, and I'm very glad that I can participate in this wonderful and, in my opinion, very important conference. It's very unfortunate that I can't be with you live in Eretz HaKodesh, but I'm pleased that we can be together at least via video. Thank you very much for this special opportunity. I will talk today about Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman's path between German society and modern Zionism. Like most of his Orthodox colleagues, Rabbi Hoffman was convinced, especially in the years leading up to 1900, that Orthodoxy was obligated to see itself as part of the German society and to participate in the general non-Jewish community. During his years at the rabbinical seminary in Berlin, however, he changed his opinion on the German state and its culture several times, so that one can recognize several approaches in his writings which need to be explained. In his famous work, for instance, about the relationship between Jews and Gentiles, the Shulchan Aruch und die Rabbinen über das Verhältnis der Juden zu Andersgläubigen, published for the first time in 1884, Hoffman emphasized the observance of state laws as indispensable and a religious duty, and he asserted that they should be regarded as sacred and, how he calls it, even divine. He draws on the Talmudic rule of Dina de Malchut Dina, which he translates as the law of the state government is always valid law. Hoffman attempted to demonstrate at length that this rule was recognized by all teachers of the Jewish law as halachically valid, and that every Jew must abide by it, while noting that even Dina de Malchut Dina, of course, has its limits, and that state laws may not replace the Torah. Hoffman's formulation and the way how he writes about that rule in his work on the Shulchan Aruch, then it attests to his patriotism and loyalty to the German state. According to him, every Jewish citizen was to internalize loyalty to the state to such an extent that his or her patriotism was not limited to the mere fulfillment of the state statutes, but formed passionate loyalty to the German state, promoting, as he writes, the welfare of the country and the salvation of its inhabitants, while directing prayers to heaven for the welfare of the government. This love for the German fatherland, as Hoffman calls it, and the adoration for the Kaiser, especially, already had been incorporated into the principles proclaimed to the rabbinical seminary under Rabbi Yisrael Hildesheim. For instance, in his annual report of 1877-78, Rav Hildesheimer proclaimed his heartful joy over the divine providence that led to the thwarting of various attempts on the life of His Majesty, the Emperor and Kaiser. To express this joy, a solemn service was held in the seminary synagogue. To express the rabbinical seminary's loyalty to the German emperor, the seminary held a festive service every year on the emperor's birthday, which Hildesheimer called a great feast day of the German people. Various festive speeches were held on this day by the seminary's lecturers, intended to underscore the duties towards the ruler and the fatherland, as Hildesheimer writes. The so-called Sedantag, the golden wedding of the all-loved imperial couple, the 25th anniversary of the emperor's reign, and the 500th anniversary of the reign of the Hohenzollern, also were considered special holidays at the rabbinical seminary, even after Hoffman assumed directorship. These examples demonstrate how much the rabbinical seminary as German Jews in general, saw itself as connected patriotically to the German state from its foundation until the outbreak of World War I, and the extent to which the seminary's teachers actively promoted this ideology among the students. But from 1916 onwards, Hoffman's writings are starting to be devoid of patriotic remarks about the German state. On the contrary, the country he had so admired became, as he calls it, a nightmare, as will be demonstrated later from his private notes. There were two noteworthy reasons for Hoffman's drastic changes. First, Hoffman had long been engaged in an active literary struggle against political, social, and especially intellectual German anti-Semitism, which over the years had a markedly negative impact on his assessment of the non-Jewish society. Ostensibly scholarly anti-Semitic publications such as the Talmud Jude 1871 by August Rohling or the Handbuch der Judenfrage 1907 by Theodor Fritsch repeatedly emphasized that Jews, despite their acculturation, did not fit into German society because their religion was based on unethical and anti-Christian elements. Above all, the anti-Semitic works of his contemporary Theodor Fritsch, which already was mentioned before, caused Hoffman and many other rabbis great concern. On the one hand, Hoffman feared that due to a lack of knowledge about Judaism, the non-Jewish society would believe these accusations, which would strengthen any anti-Semitic tendencies in Germany and become socially and politically dangerous for the Jews in Germany. On the other hand, there was the danger that many assimilated Jews, who in any case regarded Judaism with skepticism, might turn away from Judaism and convert to Christianity. Even Yaakov Rosenheim, later an important representative of the German Orthodoxy and a close follower of Rabbi Hirsch, claimed in a letter written to Rav Hofmann, while still a young man, that he owed it entirely to Hoffman's the Shulchan Aruch and the Rabbinen that he remained religious, and that it was not his great teacher, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, but rather David Hoffman, who succeeded in convincing the young Jacob Rosenheim of the correctness of traditional Judaism. The second reason for Hoffman's change of mind was the unfair treatment he and his children received in connection with repeated applications for German citizenship, which he attributed to an anti-Semitism prevailing amongst the German authorities. So in 1871, shortly after his arrival in Berlin, Hoffman submitted its first application for German citizenship, and this was rejected without any justification. There's a certificate from 1892 issued by Raphael Desheimer describing Hoffman's activities at the rabbinical seminary and asking the authorities to grant him the German citizenship. But this time, too, Hoffman received an unexplained refusal. In the year 1900, Hoffman tried once again to become a German citizen. By this time, he was already rector of the Rabbiner Seminar, and he had achieved a good reputation in the non-Jewish academic circles, as well as amongst the German Jewish public, through his literary efforts. However, this time also, his citizen application was rejected once again. From a small unpublished notebook of Hoffman, a kind of diary, we can read his personal thoughts and fears about anti-Semitism in German society, which was growing continuously during his lifetime. This notebook shows a man who was deeply disappointed by Germany. After his application for citizenship was rejected for the first time, as I mentioned before, in the year 1900, Hoffman writes, "My heart beats and my anger flared at this wickedness, that a man who has been placed as a leader over Israel is not even given what they give in good heart and quiet conscience to the lowliest among the Gentiles. In my anger I cried out, cursed be they, tear asunder the enemies of Israel. It was on Tuesday evening, the 4th of December 1900, and it was a night. There was so a terrible dream. I thought I was among the captives of Jerusalem after the city was taken by the enemies, and the enemies led me to a great palace filled with light, as if there was all the booty they took from Jerusalem. When I entered the palace, I gave a loud and terrible cry until my wife woke me up and said to me, "What is the matter with you that you cry out so loud?" I woke up, but I did not know what the interpretation of this dream was. Hoffman mentions there also the injustice that befell his eldest son, Moshe Yehuda, in Fürth, when he too was denied German citizenship. For the hand of the wicked from Berlin reached there, Hoffman assumes. He goes on to recount the pain he felt when his son came home mourning with his head covered and ashamed. To this, Hoffman remarks, "Let God remember them, what they have done to my dear son, who walks righteously and straight, and always does his work carefully. He loves his fatherland with all his heart, and would have been ready to sacrifice his life for it. And now he has been rejected by it because he is a Jew. This outrage and wickedness cries out to the eternal." Following this account, Hoffman enumerates in his notebook some historically significant events that happened in Germany starting in 1900 and leading up to the First World War. Hoffman was firmly convinced that the negative political developments in the empire and the defeat of Germany in 1918 were a clear punishment from God for German anti-Semitism. His famous student, Jona Merzbach, wrote in his memorial for him that Hoffman explained Germany's defeat, among other things, by the fact that the Kaiser had allowed the holy name of God to be blasphemed, and that the blasphemer, by which Hoffman most likely meant Theodor Fritsch, was punished too leniently. Merzbach also related that every time Hoffman saw the rainbow in the heaven, in the sky, he pronounced the appropriate blessing, then proclaimed that the world was filled with violence and that God would have brought a second Mabul had he not made a covenant with Noach. In this context, Hoffman's reflections on Germany's defeat in the First World War are noteworthy. His words reflect the deep disappointment and pain of a rabbinic scholar in Germany and even former German patriot, now over 80 years old, who invested most of his life in training rabbis for Germany and integrating them into German culture. Therefore, Hoffman writes, "Now let me tell you something about the great and terrible war that broke out on the 10th of Av in the year 5674, and by which God immensely punished all the inhabitants of the world for their offenses. The enemies punished this country, Germany, with a very great punishment, so that the emperor was compelled to flee with his whole family to Holland in order to protect his life from the wrath of his countrymen, namely the people from the party of the Social Democrats. Germany has become a republic, and all the officials and dignitaries who before were the ministers of the empire have fallen from the high position to the very bottom. Who to you, Germany, how you have fallen from such a high roof into such a deep pit? Who to you? For my curse has come true in a very terrible way. Simultaneous with his rejection of the German state, Hofmann developed an increasingly strong affection for religious and political Zionism. According to Alexander Marx, Hofmann had a very positive attitude towards the person of Theodor Herzl and his Zionist idea, and saw it and saw him and his idea as a forerunner to the return of the Jewish people to Orthodox Judaism. Hofmann believed that the followers of Zionism, having discovered a new national pride in their Jewish self-confidence, would join the Orthodox in colonizing and expanding Palestine. As early as 1902, Hofmann articulated, and that's quite amazing, in a speech to his students, his desire that a time will come and the seminary's graduates someday should continue their activities on the holy ground which God had assigned to his people as an eternal inheritance. Hofmann undoubtedly recognized already back then a great enthusiasm for the settlement of Palestine, and definitely was influenced by his teacher Israel Hildesheimer. For Rav Hildesheimer too, expansion of settlements was a particularly important concern, though he emphasized repeatedly that he was concerned only with the colonization and the education of the Jewish youth there, but not a military seizure of the land. Settlements in Palestine were to pave the way for the messianic future, whereas military intervention would have been, at least according to Rav Hildesheimer, a recklessness bordering on crime, since according to him, the actual ideal Yerushalayim will arise only through God alone. Hofmann's support for the Zionist idea takes on particular significance in the context of his educational ideal. Just as he assumed in his integrative community model that orthodoxy ultimately would exert its influence on less observant Jews in Germany, so too did he think that sooner or later the Zionists in Palestine would join forces together with traditional Judaism. In his endeavor, Hofmann believed that the Orthodox Mizrahi movement would be an important impetus for that project. From 1907 onwards, Hermann Struck, an important member of the German Mizrahi movement, maintained a dynamic correspondence with Rebbe Hofmann. In a letter dated the 12th of May 1907, Struck presented Hofmann with the following questions. First, do you believe that Zionism contradicts the ideas of the Torah law-abiding Judaism, or so-called Torah Treues Judentum? Second question, if not, do you consider it necessary for the Torah Treues Judentum to participate in the Zionist work and to unite within the Zionist organization in the Mizrahi? Third question, by what means will an influence, and it means in the positive religious sense, on the Zionist movement be achieved? A reply letter from Hofmann is unfortunately not known to me, although I assume at least that Hofmann was known in the Mizrahi circles for his positive attitude towards political Zionism, and Struck probably knew from private conversations that Hofmann would indeed support the Mizrahi ideology. Struck's purpose in writing was here to have Hofmann make his views known in writing to the Orthodox public. For example, Hofmann telegraphed a message of blessing to the Mizrahi gathering in October 1907, which Struck read before the entire gathering, stating, among other things, that Hofmann recommended that all Orthodox Jews from Germany join the Mizrahi movement. Despite his positive attitude towards Zionism, Hofman was invited in 1912 to the founding meeting of the then anti-Zionist Agudas Israel in Katowice in his capacity as Germany's most important rabbinical authority. In his speech there, Hofman stressed the importance of peace and unity among the Jewish people, religious and non-religious, which was always his top priority. Hofman was even elected then to the rabbinical council of the Agudat Israel, of the Agudas Israel. The support of the Zionist Mizrahi movement on the one hand, and his high standing in the anti-Zionist Agudas Israel on the other hand, are just signs of Hofman's desire to strengthen unity within the Jewish community and not having established really any political view on Zionism. However, since these two organizations had different political orientations, Hofman always said that he tries to stay clear of political debates, believing that a rabbi should not interfere in politics. Despite Hofman's desire to create Jewish unity, these groups unfortunately encouraged divisions amongst the Orthodox camp in the 20th century and exploited Hofman's rabbinic authority for their own political ends. Thus, for example, in the year 920, Mizrahi claimed that Hofman had described joining the Mizrahi is a mitzvah from the Torah. The editors of the anti-Zionist Frankfurt newspaper, the Israelite, inquired whether Hofman had indeed made such a statement and eventually learned that Hofman had distanced himself from such a statement. Nevertheless, the Israelite, which equated the question on Zionism with the question of the Austritt, criticized Hofman's opinion that joining Mizrahi was purely political and not a question of religious law. For the Israeli, joining the Zionist movement meant cooperating with secular or even anti-religious Jews, and since for Rav Hirsch, and according to the Israelite, also according to Rav Hildesheimer, the Austritt was indeed a matter of religious law, not communal question, not political question, a question of halakha. And according to the Israelite, this should have been the case for joining Zionism as well. Thus, the Israelite wrote, "For the rest, we would like to dispense with a discussion and permit ourselves only the remark that Hirsch and Hildesheimer, at any rate, did not regard the question of entrance into a Reform congregation as merely political one, but as one of religious law, and that one therefore does not understand why, according to Rav Hofman, the question of joining the Mizrahi should escape religious decision." Anyhow, in summary, after many years of disappointment, Hofman's patriotic attitude towards the German state and its culture became less and less important, which is why he made expansion and support of religious Zionism a central theme of his life. During his later years, Hofman signed some of his letters and notes with the Hebrew initials Aleph Taf, an abbreviation for the Hebrew Ish Tikva, the man of hope. While this was a Hebrew allusion for his German family name Hofmann, as in German you say for hope, Hoffnung, therefore Hofmann, in the context of the transformation of his personal attitude towards the German state, there was, at least according to my opinion, a far more behind this signature Aleph Taf. Hofmann, or Ish Tikva, Hofmann sought to express his fondest hope that things would eventually be better for European Jewry not being in Germany, but rather in the land of Israel thanks to the new Zionist movements. Especially noteworthy are his words in the introduction, his famous words, I would even say, in his introduction to his book of Responsa Melamed Lehoil, where he writes as follows: even if only my sons and my descendants will learn from this book, even that is enough for me. It is enough for me because the vast majority of the rest of my writings are in German, and who knows whether they will not be lost and forgotten in a few years or so. But a book in a sacred language will be preserved, and it will serve as a memento of me until the last generation. Hopefully, the Eternal will let me live in His mercy and goodness and give me the merit to translate the rest of my works into the holy language as well. Then I will offer my peace offering with singing on the altar of the Ketoret, and the Eternal shall give me the merit to go up and singing towards Zion. Also, in his private notebook, a few months before his death, one can read: in our days, the light of Yerushalayim has been renewed, for the land of Israel has come under the rule of England, and they made the politician Herbert Samuel, who is a faithful Jew, high commissioner there. Despite the oppressors of Yehuda and the enemies of Israel, my heart is confident and convinced that not many years will pass before the land of Israel will gain more and more recognition among the Jews in Germany than Germany himself, so that the Jewish inhabitants of Germany will be subordinate before the inhabitants of Israel. Praise be to the Eternal, who changes the times and changes the seasons. Atkan, the words of Rabbi Hofman, and I want to add to them that let's hope that the same desires of Hofman had to be in Eretz HaKodesh, to be in Israel, so we who are forced to stay, at least for the moment, in the diaspora, also will join you in Eretz Israel for hopefully another conference in the future. All the best. B'atzlacha rabba v'kol tuv.